Namaskar and welcome to one more edition of an innovation webinar session specially designed for the smart city teams and in this case for teams that have already won the first phase of the competition, the smart cities competition. There are 20 cities that are joining in through a range of different mediums. Different participants from the teams are joining in. We welcome all of you to this edition of the learning program. As we have been doing, this session is also designed around a specific theme and the theme has been built up based on a lot of work that has already been ongoing between yourselves and the Ministry of Urban Development. And we look forward to being able to have an engaging conversation with you as well today. Before I begin and introduce our panelists for today, I would like to do a quick walkthrough of the entire system that we've designed for you. Many of you have joined in, काफ़ी लोग already इस system को join कर चुके हैं, तो आप already familiar होंगे, but फिर भी अगर कोई नया आया है आज, उनके लिए एक quick walkthrough. आपके screen के नीचे आपको 3 या 4 different utilities नजर आएंगी. उनमें से एक utility है ask a question. You can feed in a question over there. You can feed in your mobile number. And especially if you would like to ask a question directly to our panel of experts, अगर आप मोबाइल नंबर डालते हैं तो हमारी टीम आपको फ़ोन करेगी. लाइन अगर ठीक हो तो हम आपको डायरेक्टली कनेक्ट करेंगे ताकि आप अपना प्रश्न पूछ सकें. You can ask your question directly if you're able to feed in a phone number and would like to do that. There is also a poll section. Today there is no active poll on this particular session, so you will not see that active. There is a Twitter feed that you will find. The Twitter feed is tracking the hashtag Smart Cities Challenge. If your city is tweeting, your city is sending out information through that particular process through Twitter, wants to ask questions through Twitter, please go ahead and do so. Make sure that you're tagging it with the hash Smart Cities Challenge. And the last section that you will see is, of course, the downloads section. We don't have any content there right now. Our panelists will be sharing a presentation today, and if it is of interest to everyone, we will have that available in the download section at the end of this session. So thank you very much once again for joining in. Today's session is focusing on public-private partnerships, especially in the context of the SPVs, which are a necessary element of the entire design of the Smart City program. And there is as you all know, a workshop being put in place that will delve much deeper into the public-private partnerships. And today's session is really designed to begin to talk about what the content for that will be, and also start to raise and trigger questions that may be absolutely relevant for all of you before you actually come into that session and sort of set the pace for that. Joining us today for the discussion, very kindly from the Ministry of Urban Development, we have Dr. Kumar V. Pratap, who's the Economic Advisor to the Ministry of Urban Development. Hello, sir. Thank you very much for joining us once again on this session. It was very exciting and enriching to have you on our session a few weeks ago. I'm sure our participants are looking forward to hearing you on the whole subject of public-private partnerships, which is such a core element of the design of the different projects that the city wants to implement. Over to you, sir, for your opening remarks.
Good morning. As you know, the Smart City mission talks about a paradigm change in how cities are financed in India. Earlier, there was grant-based financing of Indian cities. Now, in order to sustain the financial prospects of cities, you need more commercial sources of financing. PPPs are one of the options that you can look at, and your smart city proposals have a number of PPP proposals. So this session is on PPPs in smart cities. Now, as I was looking through the proposals, there are many proposals for multi-level parking, PPPs in multi-level parking. As many as 19 of the 20 smart cities have talked about PPPs in multi-level parking. Similarly, power, smart grid, 17, solid waste management, 12, water supply, another crucial area, 10, housing and slum development, 9, public bike sharing and e-rickshaws, 7, sewerage, 6. So as you can see, PPPs are quite popular in your proposals. Now, just to talk about what PPPs are, there is no standard definition of a PPP. PPPs are commercial transactions between a public party, which is the SPV, and the private party whom you're going to engage, by which the private party performs a function traditionally performed by the public sector. So water supply, for example, or for that matter, power supply has traditionally been provided by the public sector. For an extended period of time, the contract will not be for 1 or 2 years. We're talking of long-term contracts. They could be 30 years or more. In fact, the Nagpur PPP in the water sector is 25 years. Assumes related construction, commercial, and operational risks. You need to transfer these risks to the private sector in order to get value for the public entity. Construction risk, for example, the construction, the cost overrun and the time overrun is a major bane of the public sector contracting. And you need to transfer this risk through fixed price contracts with liquidated damages. Commercial and operational risks also need to be transferred. Things like demand risk. There's a Delhi Noida toll bridge right in the heart of Delhi. That's an example of improper contracting because the government of India, the Noida authority provided a 20% rate of return on the total project cost as a guaranteed return to the private sector. We think that's an improper way of contracting. Receives a benefit in exchange. Private party will not invest in a project unless there is money coming, there are sustainable revenue streams available to it. This money has to come from the budget or the user fees. If the urban local body wants to keep the user fees nominal, then part of this funding would have to come from the budget. Unless there are sustainable revenue streams, the private party will not spend. It will not invest in public infrastructure. Now, risk allocation is at the heart of a PPP. Risks relate to uncertain outcomes that have a bearing on financial viability. For example, you planned for so much water coming through your system, and you planned at a rate, and there's a payment risk because the parties to which this water is going have been receiving this service for free. Then there would be a payment risk. So all these risks have to be allocated between the public and the private sector through a contract. We do not have a regulatory agency right now in the water sector, so it would have to be regulation by contract. Objective should be balanced risk sharing among the parties rather than trying to push all the risk to the public or the private party. The guiding principle in risk allocation is that risk should be assigned to the agency that has more control over the risk factor. For example, political risks, risk of expropriation. A succeeding government, suppose at the urban local body level, you have given out a contract to a PPP operator for water supply. The next mayor, just from a competing party, may just try to expropriate that. That's an example of political risk that is most suitably handled by the government. That risk should be allocated to the public sector, and in case of contract termination because of expropriation, there has to be compensation for the private sector for whatever he has invested in the assets. Similarly, commercial risk belongs to the private party. So this type of risk allocation should be there. Now, level of risk borne by the private party depends on the type of contract. The easiest form of contracting is a management contract, where the private party would be doing operation and maintenance of the asset for a limited period of time. Here, private party gets paid for managing the asset, and there is very little risk for the private sector as long as it is able to show performance improvements. In a lease contract, the private party is also assigned the risk of collection, and the private party reimburses the government part of these collections as a compensation to its capital expenditure, which remain the function of the government, of the urban local body. The most advanced in this area would be a build, operate, transfer, or a rehabilitate-operate-transfer. For example, in the water supply sector, the assets are already there, and the private party is expected to rehabilitate these assets and operate it over the concession period, and then it's transferred. After the concession period, these assets are transferred to the government. So private parties in this case also take on investment and financing risks. Now, as you can see, there is a whole set of public-private partnership arrangements that urban local bodies can enter into, ranging from entirely public sector owned, public sector operated assets to entirely private operations. So in between, you can see there could be management contract, there could be a lease, there could be a BOT contract and a joint venture. And these are increasing the level of private participation in infrastructure from left to right. Now, talking a little more on the management or O&M contract, private party takes over the management of a state-owned enterprise for a fixed period. Like Government of Delhi, right now the NDMC area is talking of a 5-year O&M contract in the water sector, while ownership and investment decision remain with the state. So type of asset would be existing infrastructure, a water supply in the NDMC area. Functions which are transferred to the private sector would be operation and maintenance of these assets. And the operational staff will remain public sector employees. And that's a very sensitive thing. Employees want to remain in the public sector, and so it doesn't create too many problems from the employee side. And payment mechanism is government pays for operating and maintaining these assets, and usually a fixed element plus performance related element. And in the case of NDMC in Delhi, the NRW that they start with, the non-revenue water, is 40%. They expect this to come down within 2-3 years to 20%. That is the performance related element, and the private sector would get compensated only if it is able to attain those performance parameters. Lease or Affermage or franchise hasn't happened too much in the urban infrastructure, but we have cases of power distribution in Bhiwandi, for example, being given to Torrent Power as a franchise. In this, government leases the assets to a private operator for a fee. The essential difference between an O&M and a lease contract would be that while in an O&M contract the government pays, here the private sector would pay, and it would also be responsible for collecting the revenues from the users. So type of asset would be existing infrastructure. Functions which are transferred would be operation, maintenance, and collection. This is the difference between an O&M contract and a lease contract. And payment mechanism would be user pays, and private party typically would also remit part of these user fees to the government to cover the capital expenditure that the government is expected to put in. Now,
would you like to take a pause, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay. While Dr. Kumar takes a pause, I just wanted to put a quick message out for all the cities that are joining in for this. It's very exciting to note. I can see on our dashboard that we already have 40 sort of participants who've logged in, and about 17 individual logins, which means that a lot of different cities have come in. As we began, we had some cities already logged in with their team members: Udaipur, the New Delhi Corporation, Jabalpur, Jaipur, Surat. We are also seeing some excellent questions coming through from Jabalpur, from the Commissioner of Jabalpur. I'm going to try and bring him online as well for a question. I will request, as we are taking a quick pause over here, if there are any other questions that you have, take this moment to send those to us, because even before I introduce some of our other panelists, I am going to request Dr. Pratap to respond to some of the urgent, very interesting questions that have already come up. Going back to Dr. Pratap for a few more minutes till he closes his opening remarks, and then we will open for questions. But it's a reminder, do put in the questions for us. Dr. Pratap, back over to you.
Thank you, and sorry for this.
No problem.
The most elaborate form of PPPs is the Build-Operate-Transfer project. In this, typically the asset would be new infrastructure. In the case of urban local bodies, it could be a new multi-level parking asset, for example. And what are the functions which would be transferred? Build the asset. You need to build the multi-level parking in the CBD and operate it for the concession period, which could be 20 years or maybe 30 years, and transfer these assets back to the government at the end of the concession period. Payment mechanism would generally be user fees, because multi-level parking, there's a sharply defined benefit that is going to the users. So it would be user fees, but there's also provision for government, for money coming from the government budget if the government wants to keep the user fees nominal. Now, there are variants of the BOT model. One, the example that we just talked of was a multi-level parking which is financed by the users through their user fees. In this, investment is serviced through user fees. There's a well-known scheme of the government called viability gap funding, which gives capital grant that may be provided by the contracting agency to make the project viable. This is to the extent of 20% from the Government of India, and capital grant may be made the bidding parameter to conserve fiscal resources. In many of the urban infrastructure projects, it is the case of existing infrastructure being given out to the private sector. So the functions which are transferred are rehabilitating these assets, upgrading and extending them for the concession period, and other functions are same as BOT. Here the payment mechanism again is user fees or government budget. So you would realize that the crucial difference between a BOT and a ROT would be just the type of infrastructure assets, whether they are existing or new assets. Now, one of the popular methods for funding infrastructure could be BOT annuity, because we realize, the government also realizes that the cost recovery is very low in urban infrastructure projects. And there could be risks associated with payment itself. So the public agency can do an annuity project where the based on availability-based assets, availability of the assets of the required quality, you pay the private sector on a per annum basis. And this annuity amount can be determined through competitive bidding. What does this model do? It mitigates demand risk and payment risk falling on the private sector. The private sector is assured, once it has won the contract, it is assured of annual payments from the government side, which increase by 5% every year, typically in the model concession agreements that are there across infrastructure sectors in India. There is no grant that is paid by the contracting agency. Suppose you want to give a project out as a BOT annuity or a ROT annuity project, a water sector project, government retains the right to levy a user fee on the beneficiaries, while the government would pay to the private operator a fixed amount on a per annum basis, but the government has the right to levy a user fee on a per liter basis, volumetric pricing of water, for example. And this is very similar to the private finance initiative that is used in the UK. And UK, as you know, is one of the pioneers in using PPPs in infrastructure. Now, my question to you would be, so given that this is the background, for integrated solid waste management sector, what do you think would be the appropriate PPP model? For a water supply sector project, for example, what do you think would be an appropriate PPP model? And similarly, multi-level parking. The crucial difference between the first two and the last one here is that revenue should not be too much of a problem for a multi-level parking project as compared to a water supply project. I don't know whether people can respond, but
I'm going to request, since we don't have this on a poll as yet, this particular slide or the questions on it, please use the Twitter feed or the response feed through the question submission field, if you feel that you have a perspective on which one you might want to use, which model of PPP as described by Dr. Pratap would you feel is the recommended model from your perspective for these three options, integrated solid waste management sector, for the water supply sector, and multi-level parking? What would you recommend? Take a quick minute to think about it, and perhaps either send it to us through a Twitter input or through the question field. And if you have a specific perspective on why you might choose one, please put that into the question field again and leave us your phone. We'll be happy to call you once Dr. Pratap is finished to try and get your thoughts on this as well. Back to you, Dr. Pratap.
Right. I hope you were able to provide inputs on this. As you can see, integrated solid waste management, it could be a O&M contract, because that's the easiest form of private participation, and BOT annuity or BOT toll would be more intrusive, and you have to see whether the capacity is there in terms of political acceptability, and that's very important for these sectors which where there is a huge retail interface. Similarly, for the water supply sector, it is a O&M contract. For example, NDMC is talking about a O&M contract. There could be a BOT annuity model too. Multi-level parking, it is clear it has to be a BOT toll. It is people would be willing to pay for the convenience of parking at a secure place. But these are probably some of the models that can be used, but cities have to decide on the model depending on their requirements and political will, especially for water supply sector. And this is very crucial because countries after countries have failed in bringing in the private sector in the water supply sector. For example, one of the projects that is often talked about is the Aguas Argentinas project in Argentina, a $4 billion project, 25,000 crore project from the private sector perspective, required for improving water supply in the capital city of Argentina, Buenos Aires, and it failed. It had to be transferred to the public sector. But then there are success stories too, and the most celebrated of them is the Manila Water Company in Philippines, which is very successfully running a water supply project catering to millions of consumers and raising user charges because they provide superior services. Another word of caution that I wanted to talk about is PPP is not appropriate for very small projects. I was seeing in the smart city proposals, there is a PPP project that has been talked of for a bus shelter, and the cost of the bus shelter is only 0.7 crores, 70 lakhs. The transaction costs in a PPP are probably too high to give it out as an independent project. You may want to bundle a number of these projects in order to say take a size of at least say 30 crores. You probably the transaction cost for very small projects would be too high. Now, what are the considerations for public authority? Bankability is crucial. The private sector, as we have seen, will not bring in private investment unless there are sustainable revenue streams. Unless the what does bankable mean? Whether it is able to raise debt. For a project to be bankable, operating cash flows need to be high enough to cover debt service plus an acceptable margin. And risk of variation in these cash flows should be small. Now, many of these PPP projects are funded on a non-recourse basis, which means that the lenders do not have access to the balance sheet of the ULB, for example. Lenders are providing finances just on the basis of revenue generation from these projects. So they will very carefully assess the project risks and how ring-fenced their revenue streams are before financing a PPP project. And in that sense, an annuity model is probably more attractive to them as compared to a BOT toll project. Government should ensure financial viability of the project while not taking on too many risks. And here I would specifically point about point you towards guarantees which have been used in the Delhi-Noida toll bridge, which is entirely inappropriate way of going about it. It guarantees a rate of return of 20% on the total project cost. That is too high. It is not talking of 20% rate of return on equity, for example. It is guaranteeing a rate of return on of 20% on the total project cost. And given that many of these projects would be funded on, would be highly leveraged with the debt equity ratio being 70:30, the returns on to the equity holder could go up to 100%. We do not want to have those types of projects. So urban local bodies should not on the face of it give any guarantees in terms of rate of returns or revenues. Now, political analysis of PPPs is very crucial because costs are immediate. Costs begin from day one because the beneficiaries will have to pay for infrastructure services. For example, the water. If as a PPP project there's water metering and water is priced on a volumetric basis, then how much you consume will determine how much you're required to pay. Now, in an environment where you have probably been getting water for free or at very nominal charges at a fixed price, say right now I live in Noida, I pay 250 rupees for water for my entire household, no matter how much I consume. When the PPP player comes in, he would probably do volumetric pricing. He would have a smart meter installed there, and there would be so the costs are immediate to the beneficiaries, and benefits are long term, lower deficit to the urban local bodies, and modest fiscal improvement of the urban local body thrill economists, but not voters. Voters will vote you out. So what are probably some of the things that you need to take care of? PPP projects need to show results in order to be politically sustainable. What are these results? Results in terms of outcomes, 24/7 water supply and solid waste management. And you need to try to spread benefits to the poor for long-term sustainability. Because there is poor cost recovery, it is the poor who are left out of the grid-based or piped water supply. So if you try to see piped water supply by income categories, you would see that the richer ones are connected to piped water supply, and the poorer ones anyway pay a very high cost on water, maybe 10 rupees per bucket, for example. So you may want to spread the benefits to the poor, and that would make the project sustainable. And cost changes should be gradual. There can be a transitional subsidy. In the case of Delhi power privatization, there was a transitional subsidy of 3,500 crores when the Delhi power operations were given out to the private sector. These 3,500 crores had to come over a period of 5 years. So to make PPPs sustainable, as we have seen, outcomes should be benign. Need to cultivate stakeholders, users, and employees. They need to be provided all the data. How would they benefit? Stakeholder strategies, users and employees may not be the most efficient financially, but they're required to make PPPs politically sustainable. And then you also need to see how much value it creates for you as the urban local body. You should not be giving guarantees. We do not want PPPs just for the sake of it. It has to be a choice based on better financials. For example, the value for money from PPP projects in the UK was calculated at 17%. In Australia, it is 9%. I would recommend that similar calculations be at the should be done at the ULB level before going in for a PPP. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pratap. I think that was really a very, very interesting sort of set of slides, and also a very informative discussion that you've initiated on this particular topic, specifically because you've actually touched upon the core elements, the financial sustainability, the political sustainability, the various operational models that can actually be adopted. And I think your focus on risks in the first few slides was really very interesting and informative. We have been getting a lot of questions already on this feed, and so if it's okay with you, sir, I'll actually pose a few of those questions so that we can have a quick conversation around these models before we introduce some of our other panelists today. We have online with us the Commissioner of Jabalpur, who has actually posted 3 or 4 questions, and we felt it might be useful if he could ask those questions directly to you. So I'm going to invite the Commissioner of Jabalpur to join us online. I'm hoping that he's already on with us. Hello.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. Please go ahead. You had 3 or 4 different questions. Perhaps you might want to pose 2 questions at a time and go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. My first question is that long-term recovery PPP projects require stability in government policies and legal framework. Can any insurance mechanism be developed to secure investors' interest? And my second question is, shall MOUD provide standard RFPs for various kinds of investment models?
So 2 questions over there, Dr. Pratap.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
I will go ahead and help with that. The first question is that if they are interested in getting an investment from another country, does that require prior approval from the Government of India? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, will MOUD be providing standard RFP templates for various kinds of investment models? So are those the right questions?
I will go ahead. The first question is
it's clear.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Dr. Pratap. The voice from Jabalpur is not clear.
Second question. What we have been doing here at the ministry is to look at the RFPs and the RFQs of various cities sector-wise, and we would be happy to look at the RFP and the RFQ that you sent us. We could also think of developing model RFQ and RFPs, but it will take a month or 2, and by that time, that was the idea. We were thinking of developing RFQ, RFP and a model concession agreement for integrated solid waste management, for urban water supply, etc. But developing these concession agreements takes a lot of time. As you would know, in the road sector, it took about 2 years. In the power sector, it's about the same time. And so we would be happy to look at the documents that you send us, and we would send you our suggestions where we think you need a little improvement. But the Nagpur, for example, in the water sector, you could look at the RFQ and the RFP of Nagpur, where they have actually contracted out to the private sector. There is a model concession agreement too, and based on those, you could develop these documents and send it to us, and we would be happy to look at them with a quick turnaround. On the second bit about the foreign direct investment, now whether permission is required, I'm not sure. One would have to find out from DEA what the status is for foreign investment in these sectors. But I would also like to recommend that in the water sector, for example, you may want majority Indian ownership, 51% at least Indian ownership, because water sector is so politically sensitive that if you have a foreign sponsor providing water, it is easy, very easy to sensationalize these issues, and then it could be a recipe for project failure. You may want to keep Indian ownership 51%, at least in the water sector.
I think those are very important highlights, especially in the context of foreign direct investment, and what the sort of the political aspects of that could be, which is important to sort of understand also. I'm not sure if the Jabalpur Commissioner is still online. I know that he had 1 or 2 more questions. Is he still there? Okay, so I think we've lost him and the audio. Maybe we'll try and get him back a little later. There are a couple of other questions, and I'll go ahead and pose those to you, Dr. Pratap. Another question from the Jabalpur Municipal Corporation was, can the Swiss challenge model be adopted here? That's one question. The second one is, long-term recovery projects require stability in government policies. And also the legal framework. Can any insurance mechanism be developed to secure the investor's interest? So both of these are coming in from, I think, Jabalpur as questions. Swiss challenge model, and how do you sort of look at government stability?
Swiss challenge method basically refers to the private party suggesting a method, and then the project is given out to it. As a rule, the Ministry of Urban Development would not want to encourage those methods because there is very little competitive element in Swiss challenge. So we would want the urban local bodies and the SPVs to develop the projects and do open competitive bidding. Swiss challenge methods, because they are associated with corruption, there are ways in which the Swiss challenge can be made to more competitive too, but as a rule, the ministry doesn't encourage it. And so you may want to formulate the projects and do open competitive bidding. And sorry, the second question was?
The second question was the long-term recovery.
Yeah. That would be regulation by contract. We do not have independent regulatory agencies in water, solid waste management, for example. These would be the urban local body, the SPV would enter into a contract with the private party, and that is supposed to provide comfort to the private party for bringing in investment. This is a typical example of regulation by contract. And once the urban local body or the SPV signs it, it is expected that it would not back out after the regime changes, for example.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question for this particular phase of the discussion, and then I will introduce our panelists as well. We have on call right now Mr. Kunal Kumar, who's the Commissioner of the Municipal Corporation of Pune, joining us. He had a specific question for you as well, sir. Hello, Kunal, are you on the line?
Yes, Parvati, tell me.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very well. Connecting you onto the call for your question.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So we're talking of PPP for SPV financing. You know,
Kunal, you might have to be a little louder.
Is it fine now?
Much better, yes.
Yeah. So we're talking of PPP for SPV financing, where we are actually located in different states. We all have different, laws which govern our contracting and procurement processes. Now, the typical problem which is coming in smart cities is that we're looking for very, very innovative solutions, and these solutions are, kind of very niche in the market, and not many people develop these solutions. And there lies the issue. Like, for example, if you're trying to do a startup hub, or you're trying to do something like a transport solution which is very niche and which has been tried only in certain cities in the world. Now, if you want to do a PPP on those projects, we need to have certain procurement guidelines which are approved by the states and the center. I have my own procurement guidelines as part of the SPV, but should they differ from the state, tomorrow there will be objections. So we need to have very clear procurement guidelines in place. Is the state or the center working on this is my question.
Dr. Pratap, was that question clear, or would you like me to perhaps repeat that?
Yeah, please, because it wasn't too audible.
No problem. Kunal, if you don't mind, you'll just hold. I just want to make sure that we've got the question correctly.
Yes.
Essentially, Kunal's question is that the PPP, in the framework of the SPV, the financing model for that is differs from state to state, because it is, the different policies govern the financing elements of these in different states. And what the smart cities proposal requires is really to think through innovative problems and therefore innovative solutions. And so when they're looking at an innovative solution in a particular area that may not have been implemented in India before, or it may have been implemented only in one or two places in the world, the financing process for that, the procurement guidelines for that, for example, need to be approved with the state, because later on, if there are changes, the political structures change, there could be a lot of issues with that. So is the state and the center working on specific procurement guidelines or some guidelines around procurement that could help a team that wants to build an innovative solution for which a financial structure may not currently exist and they need to actually experiment with it? Kunal, have I got the question correctly?
Perfectly right.
Great. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Pratap.
Look, there are over 800 projects across infrastructure sectors that have been bid out as PPPs. They're not too common in the urban infrastructure space, but these arrangements have been procured across infrastructure sectors. So when you go about contracting with the private sector, you obviously have the strength of certain powers being delegated to the SPV by both the state government and the urban local body. Even if you think there is still some doubt, you can still go to them and get those approved. If you want us to look at some of these procurement guidelines, we would be happy to look at it. But per se, we are not looking at procurement guidelines for PPPs. The ministry is not looking for it, looking at it right now. But if there is a demand, we are happy to look at it.
And so what you're sharing is that if a city, for example, is looking at developing an innovative solution, say transportation or multi-level parking, wants to use a system that may not have been very popularly used so far in India, they could actually send you a sample of the manner in which they are developing their procurement structures. You will have an input into that and perhaps be able to guide them both around the political sort of ramifications of that in the medium and the long term, as well as the financial and risk components.
Yes, we are happy to do that. But the strength is coming from the delegation of powers to the SPV, both by the ULB and the state government. And these things would have to be procured at the local level. The ministry, on its part, is happy to look at the documents.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Pratap, for both responding to the questions and also providing such a sort of clear guideline and framework around the public-private partnerships. I would like to invite our second panelist to also join us onto the discussion. Mr. Ron Slangen is the Urban Development Specialist for the Asia Development Bank. The Asia Development Bank is engaged with the Ministry of Urban Development on a workshop that is being put together for the smart cities that have won the first phase. I'm going to request Mr. Slangen to perhaps share a few opening remarks and his thoughts on this whole aspect of public-private partnerships and SPVs. Hi Ron, welcome to the session.
Yep, good morning, and thank you Dr. Pratap and the MOUD for the opportunity to join you and the Bloomberg organizing this webinar. ADB is providing various types of TA support to MOUD and various states and cities in support of smart cities, as well as its other flagship programs such as En Route and Swachh Bharat. On the 1st and 2nd of June 2016, at the request of MOUD, ADB is organizing a 2-day workshop on PPPs and procurement for the top 20 smart cities as part of the MOUD capacity building program. On day 1, we'll focus on PPPs and elaborate a little bit more on some of the methods that were discussed by Dr. Pratap. And day 2 is specifically focused on procurement. The purpose of these workshops is to introduce you to best practices in these areas to benefit specifically your own smart city proposals. In today's discussion, we will briefly present the draft workshop program, and then we'd like to listen to your specific needs and interests in PPP and procurement so that we can modify the program so that we can cater the workshop to meet your actual needs and that you can maximize the learning from the workshops for the practical application for your specific smart city projects. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Raghu Swamy, who's a PPP expert and a leader in urban PPPs, who is also supporting the workshop, to introduce the draft PPP workshop program. Dr. Swamy.
Hello, Dr. Swamy. Thank you for joining the panel. For our teams that are joining in right now, Dr. Raghu Swamy is a consultant and a public-private partnerships expert who will be also joining the workshop that Ron was just talking about, requesting Mr. Raghu Swamy to share his thoughts on what is being designed.
Thank you very much, Parvati, and thank you, Ron, Dr. Pratap, for this excellent comprehensive summary of what PPPs are and how they pan out in the urban sector. As Ron mentioned, the objective of our discussion today is to set out the program, what we are envisaging for June 1st, take you through the various elements, what we intend to cover, and take your feedback on that meets your requirements. If anything specific you want us to address, we would be more than happy to incorporate that into that particular program. Just as a context in the background, let me take you through the agenda, what we have and what are the objectives that we have. Most of the cities are familiar with the PPPs in the urban sector, which is evident in the proposals which have been submitted. Dr. Pratap summarized the programs in terms of categorizing these elements into various subsectors like multi-level car parking, water supply, transportation, solid waste management, etc. PPPs have been experimented in these programs by most of the cities which are sitting today in the webinar. There have been some learnings in the past. There have been successes. There have been a few challenges which all of us have faced. And all of you would agree today that urban sector PPPs are completely different from the other PPPs what we have been witnessing in the country in the last 15 years. And there are various reasons for that. Fundamental reason seems to be that most of them are in kind of a cost center, not necessarily a revenue center. And cities are very well aware of that. That is why when we are configuring the smart city programs, most cities have come out and are also contemplating, as I'm aware of some of the cities, that looking at very innovative financing structures, innovative implementation models, etc. Now, the objective of this workshop, again, is not to take through the fundamentals. But what we want to do is to get these cities in one place, look at the commonalities of all the projects, look at the commonalities of the models today which people are talking about, try and give a platform where we can interact with each other in a more experiential and a more participative manner, and come out with a model or come out with options which cities can then go back and think about them and then configure what works for them most appropriately. That's the intention. Intention again is not to go through the basics, but more importantly, having come so far in terms of configuring the project, how do we set these projects? How do we categorize them into various models? Figure out what are the best practices, try and learn from each other, and try and use it in a manner which meets the requirement. Now, the partnering as a concept which is there in the country, it's very crudely put. We do work with private sector very closely. If you take a water supply, the person who designs it is a consultant who is there. The person who actually implements is a contractor, again, is a kind of a private sector. The person who does the billing, the meter checking, etc., we kind of outsource all these activities. So it's private sector is always present in the chain completely. What is missing in a PPP as we talk today than what is actually happening on the ground is that we are passing a little more risk which we have not been doing in the past. In terms of little more is a very loose word. In essence, we are trying to pass on a significant amount of scope of work, which is the asking them to finance wherever it is feasible, wherever we talk about either a BOT kind of projects, or more importantly, ask them to start being responsible for the work what they have been doing. That is essential difference from a PPP than what we are currently engaging with the private sector. Now, with the smart city proposals coming in, with all the projects what we are configuring, we have to work in a manner, we have to work in a context where this makes better sense for the city. The partnership should go on in a manner which gives the best value for the cities and the state agencies who are going to implement this. That's the intention. So what we have tried to do in our program, it's a one-day program, so obviously we can't put in everything, whatever is there in terms of the nitty-gritties, but try and address at the macro level and give enough ammunition to the cities to go back and configure, think their own projects and their own programs in a manner which makes sense. So essentially there are 3-4 elements which we need to address in a program like this. To start with, what is the business model what we are looking at? What is the nature of PPPs what we are talking about? Now we have seen the listing of the various subsectors, but there are also quite a few innovative structures in this. A lot of solar energy panels, there's IT related systems, there is a rooftop kind of methods. So different cities are going to come out with different programs. So if we want to engage a private sector in these kind of models, what is the most optimal way, and how do we define or how do we structure each of these projects? So we have to understand about the business models, understand about the revenue models of these projects, and what are the elements which go into structuring this. So that should be one key part of the program. So we have kind of dedicated one session on understanding the business models, understanding the revenue models of this, and try and help the cities to come out with common costing or common mechanisms to appreciate a project. Again, I'm not saying the numbers need to be common. It is just the method of doing it in a particular manner. So one discussion is focused on this. The second discussion is on the how do we get a right partner? The challenge is not to get anyone who's there in the market. The question of getting a partner who understands the project, who understands the city, works with the stakeholders concerned, and try and delivers the project in a manner which is set out in the agreement. How do we get this right combination? Now, again, I'm not speaking into the procurement angle. Procurement is going to be covered in the second day. But on the first day itself, we have to start thinking about who is the right partner, what is the kind of risk we are likely to envisage in this project, and what kind of risk we are going to share, what kind of risk we are going to retain with us, and what is the impact of that. And take a more informed decision in terms of what is feasible, what is not feasible. At the end of the day, everything will boil down to some kind of economics or a financing number, whether city will have to pay or city will have to get, depending on project to project. Now we'll have to work out a mechanism which will enable us to understand these dynamics and give us various options. If the number is not very convenient to us, probably we may have to rethink the project, or we rethink the specifications what we are looking at. So what are the tools for this? What are the mechanisms for this? So there's going to be one session going to be discussed on this particular aspect. Obviously, we need to start learning from others. So there are a lot of other cities, other states, internationally and nationally, who have done very innovative and very interesting things. So we have to understand these best practices. So some element in terms of the experience sharing is being set out for that. Now, we have been handling a national PPP capacity building program from Government of India for quite some time in the last 4 years across the country for various states. I'm sure some of you would have participated in these programs either to the state agencies or at the national level training sessions. But having said that, what we found is the most valuable to the cities is when they actually start doing projects. It's not when someone is giving a discourse or someone is giving a lecture where you probably get some pointers, but once you start putting your hand directly into it, then the experience changes completely. So what we are trying to configure is to have one breakout session, one group activity where we pick out the common projects. Now, in the list what we have in the top 20 cities have come out with various infrastructure projects. We kind of categorize them into some groups, pick out some common projects, pick out some common models, and let's have a discussion on these across states and across cities. Once we have these, the learnings I'm sure will be very useful for all of us. So that is one activity, one kind of a group activity which we have kind of configured, where we are expecting the cities, expecting the states to participate and come and share the models. Obviously, we will try and moderate it in such a manner. We start sharing whatever is there elsewhere, whatever is not covered in the particular discussion. So it will be useful to have a interaction rather than listening. It's not a theater style of lecturing, but more like a round table. You sit across and work on a project, and then program a project of relevance to you, not on a project which is not theoretical project. So we try to configure one particular session on that, and then there'll be some kind of a pointers on how do we take it forward. Now this is largely the structure what we aim to do it in one particular day. What we would request is to give out your suggestions, give out inputs in what you think should be covered or not covered. Now, what I said is the kind of very macro elements. I'm sure there are certain points which you would like to be addressed a little more in depth. There'll be some points which you would want to have a discussion. I really don't know how much we can incorporate. Definitely we'll try to incorporate as much as possible, as much as feasible, which is practical and relevant for all of us. We will try and do that. So this objective today is to take your feedback, and you can also come back by mail later. But once we discuss and have a some kind of a feedback, it will be useful to configure this in more detail. I think I'll stop here, Parvati, and then if any questions are there, we can take it.
Thank you, Raghu, and thank you, Ron, as well, for giving us a context about the session that is on the 1st and 2nd of June. So just a reminder to the cities that have been with us on this session so far. This session is designed for the 1st and 2nd of June for the 20 cities that have already won the first phase, and therefore provides a great opportunity for a much more deeper discussion, a deep dive into the public-private partnerships that all of you have already proposed in your proposals. And since, as Dr. Pratap has shared in his first few slides, there seem to be some, very big themes that are there. There's multi-city, there's multi-level parking, there's water management, solid waste management that's coming up. There are big themes that are coming up clearly, and many of those, all of those seem to be formed around public-private partnerships. Provides a great opportunity to actually deep dive into all of these. I wanted to also just reiterate a quick few thoughts from what Raghu was sharing as well. There are sessions that are designed on business models, on financial models, how to get the right partners, also breakout sessions where you will have an opportunity to deep dive into some common themes and common kinds of projects. In order to make these sessions a lot more purposeful and relevant for all of you that are going to be participating, here's an opportunity to actually use the question field on the webinar, because that's why it's been designed as an interactive process. We really would urge you to go ahead and spend a few minutes right now, put together your questions as a team, send those thoughts out, through the Twitter field, all through the questions field. What else would you like in this workshop? Are there areas that you might want them to consider as they're designing and planning for this workshop? Because I'm sure, as Ron and Raghu have both highlighted, the idea is to try and make this as useful as possible. So Raghu, is that all right if they send us some inputs to share with you?
That would be great.
Great. We do have, while we are waiting for people to put those in, and I'm sure that the inputs for the session on 1st and 2nd June will continue to come in to us. While we do that, I have a couple of questions that have already come in, and we'll take those in and wait for some more to come through. This question is perhaps this question has come in. So there are some cities that have joined that are part of the fast track cities, not necessarily of the 20 that have already won, even though that's what the session is designed for. So a quick question for Dr. Pratap on that, sir. Maybe I'm not sure if you will have an answer to that, but the question is, when do results for the fast track cities get announced? And there have been 2 or 3 questions on that have come in. Would you have a comment on that, or should we leave that for another point? Your thoughts?
Anytime now. Anytime now, the evaluations are in and they need to be announced. So we can expect it to be done anytime.
Okay, expecting it to be done anytime is what Dr. Pratap says on that. Some specific questions are coming in on the public-private partnership models. One, for example, has come from Surat City. And the municipal team over there, Mr. Jatin Shah, who's the city engineer, has shared a question. He says, Surat City has proposed fiber to home as one of the smart city projects, basing it on the public-private partnership model, fiber to home. They want to know if there are any successful examples of something of this nature having been implemented in India through a PPP model, or would you recommend a PPP model for a fiber to home kind of project, or would you have recommendations of any other approach for it?
I think we require a little more detail on the project itself. Fiber to home with regard to what activity? With what are the revenue streams, what is the type of contracting that they're thinking of, who are the people who would be consumers in this area. And so there are 3 essential elements. You need to have sustainable revenue streams for the private sector. You need to define the activity and the benefits to the users that is coming. Whether users would be willing to pay for that activity, who has been paying for it till now, is there a possibility of ring-fencing that operation and bringing those revenues to a escrow account, for example. Then what are the types of risks and how do you want it to be allocated? So a little more detail on the project itself.
I think maybe this is, sorry, Raghu, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's exactly the point what Dr. Pratap has mentioned. There is no right and wrong answer of whether we should do a PPP or not in any project. But essentially, what we are aiming at through these dialogues and these activities is to go through the process of doing it. So Dr. Pratap rightly asked the questions. Immediately when someone says that should we do a PPP project, first thing which should come to our mind is that how is the project described? Is the description okay or not okay? In this case, we hardly have a description. I mean, we just heard one sentence, fiber to home. How do we describe the project? Once we describe a project, what does it entail in terms of the business model of it? Who's going to do what? Who's going to do what? What is the risk? What is the responsibilities, etc. After that, what are the measurements? What are the outputs? How are we going to check? What is the benefit to the city? So the session will aim at driving these processes. So after that, the participants should be able to sit across and then take a very quick judgment saying, okay, if I answer these 5-6 questions, at least I know how to go about doing it. The answer is not yes or no. It's more like if these things are fall in place, then I can do it. If these things are not there, probably I have to think of a different option. So we'll probably answer those in the workshop anyway.
So perhaps what I'm hearing you say is also that this kind of deep dive into their model is also something that is possible during the workshop. So if the team is coming in, then they should bring with them inputs on all the questions that you have raised. How will it be sustainable? Who's paying for it right now? How do you envisage payments to happen on a long-term basis? So on and so forth. And if they come armed with all of these inputs to the workshop, then that creates a sort of a good opportunity to go into that deeper.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. In a similar vein, we have 2-3 more questions that are there, which are also specific not to a city but to a different kind of model. Perhaps also going into the kind of inputs for the workshop. One question is around a case study for a water system, public-private partnership based on the NRW reduction model. I'm afraid I will not be familiar with the what that acronym is, but I'm assuming that you may be. So any case studies for the NRW reduction model? That's a question that's come in. What would be a bidding parameter for solid waste management, public-private partnerships? Are there guidelines for bidding parameters? Especially this is, I think, falling into your earlier point around how do you select partners, and I'm assuming that sort of would get covered there. A third question has come in around suggesting a source for a model agreement. Where can I find a model agreement or an RFP for solid waste management and water systems based on service level agreements? So these are some specific questions. I'm just putting it out there because they are both inputs for your workshop perhaps, as well as if any of you wanted to provide any thoughts or comments on some of these.
So
on the water supply, there are about 25 different PPP projects which have been done in the country and working at different places. Nagpur pilot is one. Nagpur full city projects are available. Then NRW stands for non-revenue water. The reduction of non-revenue water is essentially how much losses we can cut down in a project. That is the mechanism. But the way the most cities have configured their water supply projects are a combination of reduction of NRW and also giving a 24/7 continuous supply. Today what we have intermittent supply, in a sense we have water for about 1 or 2 hours, don't have continuously. So cities have aimed for both reduction in losses and also providing 24/7 water. There are multiple examples in the country who have been, which are seen as a role models today. North Karnataka, 3 cities, I'm sure some of the Karnataka state is represented, they'll be very well aware of this. The Gulbarga, Hubli, Dharwad, Belgaum projects, Nagpur project, and quite a few other projects who are there. So these models are available and which can be accessed either through MOUD or the participants who actually implement the projects. So this is a kind of things which are happening in the water sector. On solid waste, there are multiple ways of looking at it. One way to look at it as a bidding parameter is the tipping fees, but also tipping fee is essentially a kind of annuity or a kind of a payment which a city pays to the private sector depending upon the activities, what it does in terms of quantum of waste which he manages. It can be done in, like in Delhi, they have done it for collection and transportation. Hyderabad has done for the entire entire city and across the components of the solid waste chain. Bangalore has done for only for landfill and composting. So there are multiple mechanisms. Trivandrum tried to do it for composting also. So there are various mechanisms of looking at this. Definitely would like to share whatever knowledge we have or whatever documents are there, and probably either as output of the workshop or as a some other guidance note which MOUD has given, the kind of documents, a repository of that can be put out somewhere, or at least the links to the documents can be provided to various participants so they can take a look at that and then try and use it if wherever it's possible for them.
Great. Ron, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that non-revenue water is certainly an area that ADB is very interested in supporting smart cities. We have a lot of good experience in other countries such as Dhaka and Bangladesh, where we helped reduce the non-revenue water from 45% to 20%. Now, this is very much a utility-based approach, so it's not just a contractual modality, but it requires more comprehensive, holistic approach. However, a district metered area approach with bulk water supply and domestic water metering capacities, and very much a performance-based type of contract. It could be a management contract or some other type of BOT type of contract. This is certainly an area where ADB has a lot of expertise, and we're also happy to support in any way to cities that are interested in this. But during the workshop, if there's a sufficient interest in NRW, we could have one case study presentation specifically on water loss and NRW types of contracts. So very much we could address that.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ron, for reiterating that point. We have broadly covered most of the questions that we've received so far. I think it's going to be very interesting for the cities to really be able to join into the workshop and begin to get much deeper into this and get an opportunity to really think through. And Ron, like you're highlighting, I think the non-revenue water, your experience of the Asian Development Bank in that space, opportunity for going into a deeper case study. I'm hoping that the city teams will write in with any other thoughts and recommendations they may have for this, especially if you want these kind of topics. Please do pitch in, send in a comment. You are also completely open to write to Pooja Tiwari, who you're already in touch with the Bloomberg team. Those questions will be passed on as well, but please do keep them coming because the idea is to try and make this interactive. As we wrap up today's session, people will continue to feed in those thoughts, and we will email those to our panelists. But as we wrap up today's session, I thought maybe if you could quickly go around our panel and take a few closing remarks from each of you. Perhaps we could begin with Dr. Pratap.
I had just a suggestion on the water sector project. So in the workshop that ADB is contemplating, probably they can have this Manila water as a case study presentation, because this is reckoned as worldwide best practice. And probably if somebody can present the success story of Manila, that could be very useful to the participant. As we have been discussing, urban PPPs in urban infrastructure is not easy as compared to many of the other sectors like roads, sports, etc. Because the ability of the people and the willingness of the people to pay for, say, water is a recent development. Traditionally, they're getting it free. So if you try to change that paradigm, there obviously would be a lot of resistance to that. And this resistance has been successfully handled in Manila. And that's why this case study presentation that I'm suggesting would be very useful. But this should not be lost sight of, and the political sensitivity. Those are extremely important. You need to talk to stakeholders, including the users, including the employees, how they see it and how their concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pratap. Raghu, your thoughts?
We have covered most of the elements, what we think are relevant. I have only two. One, of course, we definitely would like to see the feedback which cities have given in terms of what they want to get covered more than what we have said. There's one particular topic we are thinking of putting it, but I'm not sure. But there's a interest on that. Definitely, we can look at that. Is on the SPV management itself. Now, there is a cities are entering into SPVs. Like Nagpur, for instance, is a SPV which runs the water project. North Karnataka water project have SPVs. So if there's an interest in how do we cities manage an SPV of a PPP project, in a sense where they may become a partner. If they become a partner, should they become, shouldn't they become, what is the conflicts involved, what are the governance involved, what are the administrative issues involved. So that is one topic which we think if it's relevance, we can cover it. Otherwise, we can always look at some other day. But I would definitely look at feedback from the cities to on what they want to be covered in more detail. And of course, we can always have a second round of workshops with city-specific objectives in mind.
Thank you very much, Raghu. Over to you, Ron, for your closing remarks.
Invitations will be sent out by MOUD, but we would request you to send those officials from the SPVs or your municipal commissions to participate. We didn't speak much about procurement, which is day 2, but that would get into more about the types of procurement suitable for your PPP project. So there's certainly a linkage between day 1 and day 2 of the workshop. And so please do send your questions in, and we could certainly modify the program accordingly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think reiterating a point that Ron was talking about, which is that it will be great to have members of the SPV, where the cities have already formed these SPVs, members who are officers of the SPV, also members of the commissioner, the commissioner himself of the municipal corporation, and the team that will be representing much of the thinking behind the public-private partnerships. Is the invitation to join the workshop on the 1st and 2nd. We really hope that this has been a good setting point for the discussions that you will have during the workshops, and a big thank you to our panelists, Dr. Pratap, Raghu, as well as Ron, for joining us today and providing such a good base for the discussion that will follow. Thank you very much to all of you. I will urge you again to make sure that you're sending those questions in. There's a great opportunity to help design the workshop in a manner that's most useful to you. So please do send those in. You have multiple channels to do that. Thank you very much, everybody. And till we see you again in a Bloomberg session of this nature, designed specially for the Ministry of Urban Development. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.